This may come as a surprise to some of you, or perhaps it may resonate with you, but 24% of people with a diagnosed mental illness find that the holidays make their condition a lot worse, and 40% somewhat worse. Now, this says nothing of individuals who have lost a loved one, and perhaps the holidays are a reminder of their loss. I'm very excited today to be in conversation with Dr. Sabrina N'Diaye. Dr. Sabrina N'Diaye is the founder of the Heartness Center. She is also a psychotherapist in private practice. She's a trauma expert and a healer. She's located in Baltimore, but she has a global footprint. Dr. Sabrina is also the author of Big Mama Speaks, Lessons from a Harlem River Swan. Dr. Sabrina, it's so nice to speak with you. And as always, I appreciate being in community with you.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. It's so nice to speak to you also. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So let me ask you this. If we have someone who's listening to this and perhaps the headline of this conversation caught their attention and they're struggling during this season of hyperconsumerism, this season of perhaps facing the holidays, maybe recovering from or processing trauma, what might you say to them?
I think the first thing I would say to anybody who is grieving is everything that you're experiencing and everything that you're engaged in, all of your behaviors and all of your emotions make sense. Because each and every last one of us feels differently and we behave in different ways. So even in your introduction, I heard you say something about the percentage of people with a diagnosed mental illness are grieving, but also people who have not been diagnosed with anything are also grieving. And so some of us are grieving actual losses of people. And 2023 did not play with any of us. 2023 was a year of incredible loss. I don't know a single solitary person who didn't lose someone significant to them in 23. And so what I tell people is everything that you're doing, it makes sense. And I also ask people, how is it helping you move through what you need to move through in order to be not completely healed, not in order to forget what you're going through, but in order to keep walking through the process of healing.
So when you talk about healing, you see it as a process.
Mm-hmm. It is a lifelong journey. And it begins with the desire. And then as the therapist, as the person assigned to be their guide, and the person that works with people may or may not necessarily be a licensed professional, but that is the person that this person who needs healing has decided to sit with to not only hold them, but to dispense the medicine of hope. See, that's the goal. I can move my camera, but that's the medicine. Hope is the medicine. And so people seek out support so that they can get a little droplet of the medicine of hope.
You know, I'm so excited to talk to you, and there's so many ways that I could take this conversation. And so my mind is like racing a mile a minute. Mm-hmm. What's coming up for me now is there was a season in my life where I thought that when you were hurt and wounded, you go away, you process your feelings, and then when you're feeling better, you come back out. And I was speaking to a healer, Juanita Munde with Zuzu, and she's based in the Cincinnati area years ago. And I was telling her, oh no, I just need to process this and then I'll be fine. And she told me something completely revolutionary for me. Mm-hmm. She told me that we don't heal alone. And that just blew my mind because I thought, no, you take these uncomfortable feelings and you go off in a corner somewhere or in the recesses of your house and you deal with them. I wonder if you can say anything to audience members who may be feeling like, oh, this is so much and it's so big and I don't want to let anyone in.
Oh, and I just want to honor what that sister said to you is exactly how I feel. that we human beings are designed to heal in the presence and the comfort of other human beings. We are not designed to go into isolation. One thing that they say in the 12-step program is don't go into that mind all by yourself. Take somebody with you. So I encourage people to take someone that they trust, someone that can be a vessel for them without trying to take over their pain, without trying to take over their sorrow. So one thing that I even teach other people to do is just how to just sit with someone in their discomfort. How can you just say, I'm right here. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm not trying to change you. I'm not trying to tell you that you're not feeling what you're feeling, just to be right here. And very often, what I have found, people who are grieving, in fact, just today I had a young man that he suffered 3 losses: his grandfather, his stepfather who raised him, and his dog. And he said, I don't know how to even talk about them without getting choked up. And I said, what would happen if you just allowed yourself the freedom to shed a tear? And he says, but then it's too many tears. And I was like, I know, because you're working so hard to suppress it that you're getting a backlog. And so he sat in my office just today and just let it out. And then I said, who in your family line also expresses strong emotion? And sure enough, it was his grandfather. So it makes sense.
When you talk about strong emotions, I explained to a mentor of mine, Dr. Carrie Jackson, that I felt like sometimes it's like you're carrying a cup of water and that water is filled to the brim. And every once in a while, you have to spill your water in front of safe and supportive people in order to let it all out. Because I don't know what it is about American society, but sometimes you can feel bad when you grieve, or you can feel bad when you express the deep and strong emotion. I don't know why that is. I believe that we've been conditioned to feel like emotion is a weakness. But I like that analogy of like, okay, I need someone to help me carry my water, or I need someone to help me just sit with me in this.
Absolutely. We also tend to think that our tears they only represent one emotion. And sometimes, you mentioned losing a family member. I've lost family members. Sometimes my tears are not necessarily grief. Sometimes they're gratitude. Sometimes they're awe. Like, I think love is amazing. And sometimes I will be reminded of how much love I've had in my life, and I will just break down and cry from just the beauty of it all. And I'm not necessarily sad or angry. So just to let people experience that emotional range and then to let it move through them. And each morning it's going to be a different emotion.
Do you have any tips for people who are navigating this holiday, and perhaps this is the upcoming holiday? I know we've been in a season of holidays, but if there's someone who tunes in right now, the middle of December, and perhaps they are going to be confronting Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, which is past, but confronting these things, and perhaps their first year without their loved one, and even if it's not the first year, it's still difficult. What might you say to someone who finds themselves in that situation?
I would tell people, obviously, the first thing is to reach out, to identify either a professional or non-professional, someone that you can say, I am sad this year. And maybe I want to change venues, or maybe I want to change what I do around this particular holiday. Or maybe I want to honor this person that I love on this particular holiday. I lost my aunt earlier this year, and she was my best friend in the whole wide world. And some days I wake up and I cry because I'm like, oh my God, what did I do to deserve this person? And even just today, I'm realizing that, holidays are here. I had Thanksgiving without her. I wore her necklace on Thanksgiving. I'm going to wear her necklace on Christmas. I've been writing her letters. I've been asking for her guidance. And she's very clear. You better keep living. You better keep having fun. You better keep doing A, B, C, D. She had Alicia Keys, that song, This Girl Is on Fire, as my ringtone whenever I called her. So the song came on and I started crying, but then I played it again and I just said, thank you. So we can create a multi-sensory altar of sorts. I don't want people to think that you have to have a certain religion to do this, but have a multi-sensory experience of honoring and remembering that person.
I love that. Dr. Sabrina, well, let me say this. For those of you who are coming into the conversation, I'm Jennifer Farmer. I'm the founder of Spotlight PR. And through Spotlight PR, I've had the great pleasure of meeting a host of wonderful individuals, such as Dr. Sabrina N'Diaye with the Heartness Center, Dr. Sabrina N'Diaye, excuse me. And so I just want to say that for people who are coming in and just wondering how this conversation came to be. And now I'll say that 2 years ago, my mother died in April. And that was probably the greatest loss that I've experienced to date. And, my mother died 2 weeks before my birthday. And it just so happened that I had planned a birthday trip. And so I knew that she was at the end and I was contemplating, okay, do I go on this trip knowing that she's so sick? What happens if she passes when I'm away? Well, it just so happened that she passed 2 weeks before the trip. And I took the trip through many tears, but it was also a pleasant distraction. My mother's birthday was Christmas Day. And so like the two times and you never know when emotions are going to pop up. So I can't really say that 2 times a year because I've had things hit me when I least expected. But around my birthday and also around my mother's birthday, I try to go somewhere. And I try to physically be out of my typical surrounding because it just helps me to be in a new environment. And I wonder if there are any other tips. I heard you say like writing a letter. I even took a grief class and they sent everyone like chalk and they sent everyone a notepad and they told you to just draw. And I would not have thought, okay, who would think to draw? But are there any other things that come up for you in terms of ways that we can acknowledge the grief that we might be feeling and also move through it?
Yes. So writing is always my go-to, and it's what I teach people how to bring images in and write to the image. Drawing is another way. I don't use the chalk though. I actually use crayons or markers. I do a lot of imagery where I have people close their eyes and literally envision that person in front of them and ask them a question. What do you need to know about your life in this moment? Because they're over there now. They know everything. And that's what my tradition says. They know everything over there. So it might be you closing your eyes and imagining them. And maybe that imagery can also give you what you need to keep going. I often think about Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He was in the Auschwitz concentration camp, and he was down to 75 pounds. And he wrote about how closing his eyes and seeing his wife, who was already dead, and smelling her scent allowed him to keep going. And he did survive the concentration camp, and he became this well-noted therapist, psychotherapist here in the US. So I invite people to do whatever brings them comfort. It might be holding on to a stitch of clothing. It might be taking long walks. It might be pursuing a dream that that person had that they could not take to fruition. My grandmother didn't graduate from high school. So every time I do something that brings success, educational success to me, I'm like, I'm her dreams come true. My daughter got her master's. I'm like, look at this. Your great grandmother couldn't do this. She paved the way for you. So I always invite people to consider the fact that we're all going to be ancestors. How are you going to be a good one? And how do you honor the good ones that left before you?
I love that. I mean, I can really sit with that and think about, and think about that. Your gift is so unique and it's so expansive because, you're sitting with me talking about this season and helping people navigate it. But you're also someone who goes into crisis situations. When many of us are in the comfort of our homes watching, you go to the crisis. You've been present following mass shootings, following natural disasters, working with healers, the people who heal. And I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about that work.
Oh, well, interestingly enough, I just returned from Houston. And the Houston community, they have this huge healing collaborative. But I actually met them in 2017 or 16 or 17, right after Hurricane Harvey. So I met them when they were in the midst of their own grief over the people and the things and the identities, all that got washed away in the hurricane. And so that was 7 years ago. Here I am now watching them guide other people. And that brings me incredible joy. But we also cried a lot together. And there was rage and frustration and concern and looking at the realities that people with more financial resources got better services and all the things that happen. But for me personally, as a person who is trying to guide other healers, I have to tell you the truth, Jennifer, I cry every day. There is not a morning that I don't finish my prayers and feel sorrow in my throat. And I just don't run from it. I just let it move through me. And it's the letting it move through me that allows me to be present for other people when it needs to move through them.
Okay, so I have to ask you a question here. What would you say to people who've been told, "Oh, you're just too emotional," and as a result, when those feelings come up, they try to suppress it because they've been told that it's bad. So, what would you say in response to that?
Yeah, I would say talk to other people. People have always said that to me. And now I respond with the question of, what does that mean? What does that mean? Is my sorrow making you uncomfortable? That's okay. I just had a woman yesterday tell me, not yesterday, I think it was Friday, Thursday or Friday. Her son was murdered by someone who didn't know her son, and her best friend told her, I can't be friends with you anymore. It's just too much. And she was telling me how this is this double hit of grief. And I said, the reality of it is your friend, after 40 years, is so uncomfortable watching you be this uncomfortable that she has to walk away. And maybe it's for the best, because what you need is someone to say, I get it. And you're not over it yet. Someone murdered your son. There is no getting over. And so that is one of the reasons why getting into a grief group, a grief support group, like you mentioned, seeing someone, creating a circle. We had we just had World AIDS Day, and I'm not sharing anything that's not public knowledge, but I can remember when my brother was diagnosed with AIDS back when men were dying on the street. And I talked to my mom. I was young when this happened. And I remember telling my mother, I don't know what you're going to do, but I'm calling up some friends. And I'm going to have 6 friends come over here and help me. And I think you should do the same thing. Try this out for a change. And maybe the last time in her life, she listened to me. And she called her friends. And they came right over. And this is a time when there was a lot of shame around having HIV and AIDS. And I said, we cannot give in to the shame. We are not going to hide it. We're going to tell who needs to be told. We're not going to be ashamed of it. And I believe that it is that love and the honest expression of emotion that allowed my brother to stay alive. And he's still alive, symptom free. And that's a part of it. Like, we're not going to cower. We're not going to be afraid of what we're feeling. There is grief around it. There is fear. And then the other piece when we grieve is sometimes we're grieving future losses. When it's someone as young as my brother was, there is grief around an early death, grief around the things that we're never going to get. When we lose a baby, we're never going to see this person grow up. We're never going to see this happen or that happen. That's also a part of the grief. And then there's the rage around the injustice. And so when we can create these pockets of community, we can express those frustrations in a healthy way. And then we can be productive.
I'm amazed that you had the wherewithal to say, okay, we're not going to run from this, or we're not going to hide it. I'm going to call up my friends. Can you talk a little bit about that, and not just the wherewithal, but also the courage?
I don't even know, Jennifer. I was in my 20s, but I've always had this inside of me, and I was watching all these young Black men die on the streets. I was living in New York City at the time, and they looked like the Walking Dead. And I realized there was a pattern of them being ostracized from their families. I'm not judging the families. Everyone was afraid. They were telling us, oh, you can catch AIDS from swimming in a pool or breathing on someone. And so I can respect the fear. But there was something inside of me that said, this is not accurate. If that were the case, we'd all have it. It's the shame that's making them go into these corners and die alone. And what I was very committed to was to ensuring that my brother, if he was in fact going to die, that he would not die alone. I knew that was a pattern I was going to break.
Your love for your family and also for other people, because it takes love to go into a community and to be present in the community's pain, is so profound. And so I just want to honor you. I want to honor you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
And then I also want to go back to the experience that you shared about the woman who lost her son and a friend telling her that she couldn't be with her. I wish that were an isolated experience, but I think that happens more often than not. People see you struggling, or they see a person struggling and they don't know how to process it, and then they walk away. I had that experience with my mom where a good friend, she just kind of shut down. Now, I later found out that it triggered for her loss of her own mom. And I don't think that she was used to seeing me breaking down, and it was very difficult for her. And I think we probably went maybe 9 months without talking. We've since reconciled. But I remember feeling like where is she? And so I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, because I know that the woman that you described, my experience, we're not the only ones.
And unfortunately, we're not the only ones. And that ties into what you were saying earlier about how we have this notion that we should hurry up and move on. We have this idea that a strong woman cannot also have strong emotions around the reality of loss. We have this idea that equates strength with never, ever crying in public or breaking down. And I find that it's just the opposite, that your strength comes when you give yourself permission to have that emotional range. And the more you have that, the less likely you are to get sick from your grief. So what I tell people when people turn their backs on them in the midst of their grieving is to forgive them. That exactly the behaviors around grief are different for every single last one of us. Every single last one of us grieve differently. So in that moment, I might say, just forgive her, but also give her space if that's what she's asking for. And to let everyone feel what they need to feel. But when the time is right, you'll know when it's okay to circle back. And if you leave that door to your heart open, everyone can be okay. But we don't have to push, we don't have to force. We can just let people be who they are in that moment.
And if we have individuals who are listening and they want to find a way to support the work that you're doing, how might our listeners support you?
Oh, they can find me at my website, theheartnest.com. That's probably the fastest way to find me. They can email me, Sabrina at theheartnest.com, and
Can
somebody
they
will.
donate? Can they donate through your website?
Oh, what a really fantastic question. I have a nonprofit that I have just put together called Our Village Roots, but I don't have the link set up yet. So, but if they wanna email me and make a donation to some of the work that I'm doing, particularly to allow people to come to my grief workshops that I'm putting together next year who may not be able to afford it.
Okay, great. So email you or visit.
The
Can you
heart
give us your website again?
www.theheartnest, that's TheHeartNest.com.
Great. Now, I've talked about some of your work, and I want to hit on two things before we leave. I want to talk about the work that you're doing in prisons, as
Mm.
well as your book. So, can you start with
Oh.
the work that you're doing in prisons?
Oh my gosh. Can I just tell you, Jennifer, that this work, I feel like everything I've ever done my entire 30 plus years of working, not of living, I've been living longer than that, has prepared me for this work that I'm just wrapping up. I've been working with the Center for Mind Body Medicine at the Indiana Department of Corrections, and it has been the most fulfilling project, one of the most fulfilling projects I've ever worked on. I worked with women, incarcerated women, separately from incarcerated men. I guided them in doing their own healing work. I guided them through sort of a mini retreat at the prison. And then I gave them a pause. And then I went back and taught them how to facilitate healing groups with other incarcerated women and men. And it's been incredible. And what I've been in awe of their capacity to hold each other, to understand each other, to lift each other up. And so many of those women have since been released, and they are just so hungry to continue to be of service to other formerly incarcerated women. It's been incredible. And that might tie into the book because I write a chapter about my work with the women in prison in my book. My book is called Big Mama Speaks: Love Lessons from a Harlem River Swan, and it is dedicated to my maternal grandmother, Marion Briscoe, who was assaulted by two police officers when she was 33 years old and lost her capacity to function in the world. She was pronounced legally dead, and last rites were performed. And then she proceeded to live for another 51 years after waking up on Good Friday from a 50-day coma. So this woman was just a miracle. I can't even believe, that makes me cry. I can't even believe I was blessed to even know such a human, such a soul. And so I took care of her until her death for 6 years. I think it was 6 years. And she passed away in 2011. And then after she died, I started writing to her. That's why I'm so passionate about the writing. And after a while, I was writing to her, and then she started to write me back. And what emerged was this big fat journal of conversations between the two of us. So I took the journals and I synthesized the data, and I got these themes. And these themes that emerged, I was able to look at how the writing of the day shaped the experience I was having in my own life, which then shaped how I was able to serve my clients. And so each chapter demonstrates how Big Mama influenced me. This this woman who was a teenage mom, never did anything quote unquote substantial in this world, but she did everything, and how she guided me in my work as a healer. It's a fun book too. It's sad, it's happy, it's funny, and it'll make everybody cry and everybody laugh. And that's the goal.
And where can we find the book?
Ooh, you can find it on Amazon. And I also have a separate website called bigmamaspeaks.com.
Just a few more questions before we wrap. When you were born, your family was holding some level of grief as your paternal grandfather went missing and was never found. You wanted to bring ease to your father's heart around missing his dad. What would you say to people who are witnessing loved ones or friends grieve and they want to be present with them in that moment? Perhaps they don't know how.
Sometimes the best thing we can do is ask, what do you need? And sometimes people will say, I just need you to sit here. Sometimes they'll say, I need some food. Sometimes they'll say, I need some water. Sometimes they might say, I might need to call someone at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is what I needed when my aunt died. Because I've been talking to her at 8 o'clock in the morning for the past 40 years. So I told two of my friends, I need an 8 a.m. call. Are you okay with me calling you and just cursing for 5 or 6 minutes? They're like, yeah, that's fine. Because that was my cursing buddy. So the story with my dad, however, was even deeper than that, because my mom was pregnant with me when my grandfather disappeared. And I was born while my father was grieving. And so my life actually helped move my father's grief, my existence, because I was born looking just like his father. So sometimes we don't realize that the darkest part of who we are is also the part where that light is trying to come through, and that something glorious is growing from that black, crazy, dirty concrete. And I'm always trying to get people to remember that something beautiful is growing through the rubble. What is it for you?
What else to say? I mean, that was just.
Oh, thank you.
I know I've told you this before, but when I first met you, I was kind of like an internet stalker. I was going and I was listening to all your videos,
Oh,
and I was like,
thank you.
okay, well, no, this one's only 11 minutes. I need to find another one because they weren't long enough for me.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank
So,
you.
yeah, so thank you so much for sharing part of your Monday night with me. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap?
Oh, I want to thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be in your presence, to learn from you. And I also want to thank all the people, whoever they are, that are watching and listening. And I want to just remind people that no matter what is happening, they are still here for a divine purpose, and that hope is now and always has been the medicine.